Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Roach here again for our next lesson in science. And so, before we get started for this week, I just want to make sure you're ready for learning, that you have a quiet space, you have a pencil, and a notebook to write in. Okay, so let's get started. We are still working in lesson 3, learning about objects in space. Last week, we did the lesson opener and the Page Keeley probe, and you also participated and observed Mr. Abbott's lab on the Craters Lab. And so this week, we are going to continue our learning about objects in space in the solar system. And our objective for today is I can describe the difference between the inner planets and the outer planets. So we're going to be looking closely at the different planets and their characteristics. And we're also going to be learning new vocabulary words. So I can acquire and use new vocabulary words in context with objects in space. All right, so here's our essential question that was introduced last week. What other objects can be found in space? And so we already know that planets, stars, and moons can be found in space. Well, today we're going to be learning about some other objects that you maybe already know can be found in space or made a prediction about being found in space. We're going to learn about those objects and their characteristics. All right, so here we have our vocabulary words for objects in space. And we're going to learn about 3 objects in space that is other than planets and the stars and the moons, okay? So each of these 3 objects, asteroid, meteor, and comet, are objects that can be found in space. Today's lesson is going to be focusing on mainly talking about asteroids, and we're going to be talking about the inner and outer planets. And then the next video lesson, we're going to focus on meteor and comets, okay? So here is our vocabulary word for asteroid. The definition is one of many small rocky objects between Mars and Jupiter, okay? We are also going to be learning about meteors, which is a chunk of rock from space that travels through Earth's atmosphere. And we're going to be talking about comet in the next lesson, which is a mixture of ice, frozen gases, rock, and dust left over from the formation of the solar system. So we're going to be looking at some examples and finding out the characteristics and comparing and contrasting each of these objects that are found in space. But for today, we're going to review a little bit about gravity and how why planets orbit the sun, and how gravity and inertia, if you remember from about a week back when we talked about gravity and inertia. So why do the planets orbit the sun? Can we remember from about a lesson ago? Okay, I hope you were able to remember what we learned in lesson 2. And we said that the planets are held in their orbits around the sun by the force of gravity between the sun and each planet. Along with the force of gravity, inertia helps keep planets orbiting. So I do want to review that concept because we're going to see how that relates or affects, how does gravity affect objects in space? So for example, how does gravity affect asteroids, comets, and meteors, which we're going to be learning about this week, okay? All right, so boys and girls, here's just an example of a graphic organizer, a way to organize your notes. Whoops, sorry about that. A way for you to organize your notes if you have a science copybook that you're keeping notes in or taking notes in. So if you don't have to print this out, you can, draw 8 boxes and label them with each of the planets. And so if you would like to do so before the lesson continues, you can pause and, draw this in your notebook as a note-taking, organizing strategy. So please pause if you would like to draw this on a piece of paper or in your notebook. Okay, so we're going to be learning about all of the 8 planets, okay? Boys and girls, some of these planets, half of these planets are what's called inner planets. The other half is called the outer planets. Now, why do you think they have those names? Well, yes, it depends on how they are organized, how close or how far they are from the sun. So let's read this paragraph together about the inner planets of the solar system and see what they are and why they are called the inner planets. All right, so read along with me. The 4 planets closest to the sun are called the inner planets. They are also called the terrestrial or rocky planets because they are mostly made of rock. They are made mostly of rock. Evidence suggests that each has a core of iron. They have relatively similar sizes and closely spaced orbits. They have few, if any, moons. All the inner planets rotate relatively slowly, and none of them have rings. Despite these similarities, each planet has its own unique features. So, boys and girls, just a preview. Earth is considered an inner planet, and I'm going to show you why. Okay. So, we've seen a diagram similar to this when we were learning about the sun, the earth, and the moon in lesson 2. And so here you have the 4 most inner planets, okay? So they would be the closest to the sun versus the other 4, which are called the outer planets. So here we have Mercury, which, what planet appears to be the closest, boys and girls? Yes, Mercury is right. It looks like it's right next to the sun, but it's a good bit away, not as close as it appears in the diagram. Then we have Venus, Earth, and Mars. All right, so we're going to be talking about these 4 planets first. Then we'll go and talk about the outer planets of the solar system. Okay, so first up, we have Mercury. Okay, here is a picture over here. And here's just a fast fact about Mercury. It says Mercury's surface is covered with craters. So, we during the craters lab last week, we found out that meteors can hit the earth. Okay, they can hit the earth and make an impact. Well, they can also, objects in space can also hit other planets, okay, because they're orbiting in space as well, as long as Earth. So it makes sense that other planets could be hit by a meteor as well. So let's read about Mercury. Okay, so we're going to read some characteristics and some facts about Mercury, which is the closest to the sun, boys and girls. So please pause and read this paragraph about Mercury to yourself or out loud. Okay, so I hope you read this first sentence that said Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. That's important. That's going to be one of your questions on your assignment this week, too. So you can imagine how hot Mercury is if it is the closest to the sun, all right? So you think about Earth, we're the 3rd closest to the sun, and there are some parts on Earth that get over 100 degrees, okay? Some states in the United States and some parts of the country get really, really hot and go over 100 degrees. So just imagine how hot it can get on Mercury. And so we already talked about how the surface has many craters, just like Earth's moon, okay? And from last week, our lab, it says a crater is a hollow area or pit in the ground, okay? So think of our lab from last week that Mr. Abbott did. And so when craters form, when large rocks, space rocks crash into other space objects, and also Mercury is the smallest inner planet. So that's an important fact too, okay? All right, on to our next inner planet. We have Venus. And here is a nice picture of Venus. Venus is also very hot, okay? It's the 2nd closest to the sun, so still very hot. What Venus has that's different than Mercury is that its atmosphere is so thick. It's made of lots of carbon dioxide, and this does not allow heat to escape easily. So this actually makes Venus the hottest planet out of all the other planets. And it's not the closest to the sun, which you would think Mercury would be the hottest planet or have the hottest temperatures, but it's actually Venus because of this thick atmosphere that makes it the hottest. Okay. And so please pause and read some more information. Read this paragraph about Venus. Okay. I hope you were able to read that it also has some volcanoes located on it. Um, and so on its surface, there is lava. Okay. So they're active volcanoes. All right. And here's planet Earth. Okay. So let's read this together. It says Earth is unique in our solar system. It has oxygen and liquid water. Earth is the only planet known to support life. Earth's atmosphere keeps temperatures from getting too hot or too cold to sustain life as we know it. It is the largest of the inner planets. Okay, so boys and girls, what makes Earth unique? Yes, it's unique because it's the only known planet that can sustain life and that has oxygen and liquid water. So that makes it very special. All right. And it's also the largest, which is another fun fact. All right. The last inner planet we're going to talk about is the planet of Mars. Okay. So if you look here, the fast fact about Mars is that it has kind of like a reddish, rusty color. Okay, that makes it kind of very easily to pick out in a lineup because of its reddish color. So please pause and read a little bit about Mars and its characteristics. Okay, I hope you're able to find an important fact that Mars is the most like Earth. Okay. And really, Mars is studied really closely because the fact that it has similar characteristics to Earth and is the most similar to Earth. And this is another question on your assignment this week. And so that's just something to keep in mind that it's the most similar. Although, if you look right here, it says Mars is much colder than Earth. So its temperatures are not, I guess, on average as warm as those that are on Earth, the temperature on Earth. Okay. And another interesting fact is that its water, if you look here in this second to last sentence, its water is frozen in ice caps near both poles. So the thing about Mars is that it does have a source of water. There's water on there, but it's frozen. So think about that. Do you think that that's more sustainable than having liquid water on Earth? No, it's not. So they would need that water to melt at some degree for life to be able to exist there. Okay. And so, NASA is hoping to actually be able to send astronauts to Mars in the future. All right. So I want you to think about those 4 inner planets we just learned about and read about: Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and pick one of them and try to name one of them and describe one of the 4 inner planets. So either 4 of those planets. So please pause and do this activity. Okay, here is an example of one of the planets you could have chosen, one of the inner planets. Mercury is the closest planet to the sun and the smallest inner planet. It has a lot of craters, all right? So you notice how it says closest planet? It's not the hottest planet. That's Venus, okay? Don't confuse the two. All right. All right, so we're going to talk about one of our vocabulary words, which is one of the objects in space we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the lesson, which are asteroids, okay? So take a look here on the left side of the screen. It says Beyond the Inner Planets is the title, and we're going to read this out loud. Beyond the orbit of Mars is a belt of space rocks called asteroids. These are rocky or metallic objects that orbit the sun. Scientists have accumulated a great deal of information about asteroids in recent years. Space probes have sent back information that provides pictures of these orbiting objects. So here is a picture on the right here. They named this Ida, which is a heavily cratered, irregularly shaped asteroid. And it says down here, did you know the largest asteroid in the asteroid belt is about 1/4 the diameter of Earth's moon? And so I'd like you to just think of this question. Why would scientists want to find information out about these orbiting objects? Why would they be continuously studying and trying to find more information out? If you're thinking that they need to know about these objects in case any of them come too close to Earth and we need to know their characteristics and be able to predict if they're going to come too close to Earth, you are absolutely correct. And so that's what scientists, a big part of NASA's job is to regulate these objects in space and monitor them and make sure that, we're safe from them. So what are asteroids? What are asteroids? Okay. They are rocky metallic objects that orbit the sun in a belt between Mars and Jupiter. And this belt is called the asteroid belt. We're going to be talking more about that today in this lesson and then in the next lesson as well. So remember that word, asteroid belt. Very good. All right. Now we're going to move on to the outer planets of the solar system. All right, so there are 4 more planets we're going to talk about, and these 4 planets beyond Mars are called the outer planets. They are also called gas giants because they are huge compared with the inner planets and because they consist mostly of gases. The largest gas giant, Jupiter, is 5 times farther from the sun than Earth is. And so the inner planets, how they are mostly made, they're rocky, mostly made of rocks. The outer planets are mostly made out of gases. That's why they are also called them the gas giants. And they call them giants because of their size compared to the inner planets. So we're now going to learn about the 4 outer planets. So we've already talked about Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And so here's the line separating the inner planets from the outer planets. And so now we're going to talk about Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Okay, so the first outer planet we're going to talk about is Jupiter. Here is a picture of Jupiter, and it says the fast fact, Jupiter's 4 largest moons were first discovered by Galileo, I hope I said that right, in 1610. So they've been studying the planets for a very, very, very long time. All right. I would like for you to pause and read some information about Jupiter's characteristics. So please pause now and read this paragraph to the right. Okay. Some facts that I hope you found out while you read is that it has very strong winds on Jupiter. Okay. And one of them is called the red spot, and it is the size of Earth. The red spot is a storm that's been blowing for over 400 years. So think about that. If it has a spot located on it that is the size of Earth, can you predict how much larger Jupiter is than Earth? Yes, a great deal. If it has a spot on it that's larger than Earth, then the entire mass and diameter of this planet is much greater than Earth's, okay? And so we are going to move on to our next outer planet. So we're moving out further away from the sun. So Saturn is the next outer planet. Let's read about Saturn together. It's a short paragraph we'll read together. Saturn is the second largest planet. It is famous for its system of rings. The rings are made of pieces of ice and rock. Most of these pieces are less than a couple meters in diameter. Saturn has at least 62 moons. The largest is named Titan. Okay, so Saturn is famous for its rings. Okay, that might be one of the reasons why you might be able to identify this. Whoops, sorry about that. You might be able to identify this planet right away because you notice its rings. I'm so sorry. This keeps jumping. All right. The next 2 planets, the next 2 outer planets comes Neptune, okay? And then we have Uranus, all right? And so, boys and girls, Neptune is the furthest away from the sun, okay? So next comes Uranus, and it is sometimes known as the sideways planet. So if you look at this picture here, you can tell why, okay? It is tilted on its the axis is tilted so much that it rotates on its side. Okay, so that's why it appears to be sideways. And it's also an unusual blue-green color, which is also one way to identify it, Uranus. All right, then we have Neptune, which is the farthest gas giant from the sun. Okay, it's very windy on Neptune. There is believed to be an ocean underneath of Neptune's clouds. Now, because it's so far away from the sun, it's the farthest planet. We can predict or infer that it's maybe ice, or possibly, most likely, it's an ice ocean that's frozen. There are volcanoes that exist, but they call them ice volcanoes because they shoot up material very high in the form of ice because it's so cold there. Okay. So that is all of our planets. We learned about the inner and outer planets and all the characteristics. I want you to think and respond. It says, name and describe one of the 4 outer planets. So up here in the bubble here, you have Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, just to recap what we just talked about and read about. So I'd like for you to pause now and complete this activity. You can do it in your science copybook. Okay, here is an example of one of the planets and descriptions you could have written. Jupiter has bands of strong winds that blow in opposite directions. It has 4 very large moons. Okay, so if you need it to rewind back, that's fine too. If you ever need to pause and look back, please do so. All right, boys and girls, we're just going to recap what we learned about the inner and outer planets. Okay, if you were taking notes, this is an example of, what your note taking might look like if you were pausing and jotting down notes while I introduce each planet and its characteristics. You may also, keep this screen on pause when you go to do your assignment, and you can use this graphic organizer to help you with your assignment. Okay, so you can always come back to this and leave the screen on pause to help you with your assignment. All right. So here are some closing thoughts and questions. We're going to wrap up our lesson today. What planet are you most interested in and why? Okay, so there's a question for you. Here is a closing thought. The inner planets are small and rocky, and the outer planets are large and considered gas planets. Okay, so that's how we describe the difference between the inner and outer planets. All right, here's another closing thought. Asteroids are objects found in space that are rocky, metallic objects that orbit the sun. So just like planets, they also orbit the sun. And here is another question. What other objects in space will we learn about this week? Okay, and so we are going to learn about our next 2 vocabulary words. We're going to talk about meteors and comets in the next lesson. All right, so here is our science joke of the day. What do planets like to read? Comet books, okay? And we will be learning about comets in the second video lesson, okay? So I will see you guys for the next lesson, and we will finish learning about objects in space. Please do your assignments. It is assignment 13, objects in space, and I will see you for the next lesson. Bye-bye, boys and girls.